Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're going into, well, the very unique landscape of personal memory. Specifically those moments, those tiny details that your brain just files away because they don't make any sense at the time.
Right, like a single facial expression.
Exactly. We're talking about a 50-year journey to finally understand just one look.
It's a really fascinating deep dive into cognitive dissonance. I mean, when something devastating happens, you expect the emotional reaction to match it, right?
Of course.
But what happens when that grief is, well, when it's mixed with something that looks like joy or serenity? The mind just rejects that contradiction.
But the memory stays.
It lingers, yeah, just waiting for the context to finally catch up.
And that's our mission for this deep dive. We're unpacking a really powerful narrative that centers on one single tragic day, September 9th, 1959.
The sudden death of a father.
And the 50-year mystery that followed, all about his wife's reaction. We're going to track how profound sadness and this unexpected comfort can actually exist in the same moment.
It's so compelling because the source material isn't just about an event. It's about the emotional synthesis of loss and something like hope. It shows you that sometimes the most essential parts of someone's pain are the ones they carry completely in private.
Until they're ready to share.
Decades later, yeah. Until they're ready to share that one missing piece of the puzzle.
Okay, so let's unpack the timeline. The lead up to this tragedy, because it has this just crushing layer of irony.
Of false security.
Exactly. We are 6 weeks before that day, September 9th, 1959. The father complains of chest pains.
An immediate alarm bell, you would think. And this is 1959, so a doctor's word carried this almost unquestionable authority. So when they call a cardiologist, they're looking for an absolute answer.
And they certainly got the visual trappings of authority. The narrator recalls the doctor arriving the very next day in this enormous chauffeured black car.
Wow.
And here's the detail that just sticks with you. The narrator says it, oddly enough, resembling a hearse.
And that's just fascinating, that visual detail, because it works as this retroactive foreshadowing.
Right.
At the time, it's just a strange, imposing car. It signifies, the importance of the person arriving. But looking back 50 years later, that memory of the car adds this chilling layer to the story.
A hint of what was coming.
A hint of the fate that was perhaps already sealed.
And then the diagnosis came. And it was just heartbreakingly a complete dismissal of the danger. The cardiologist examines him, clears him, and says he's fit.
No heart problem at all.
No heart problem at all. That's 6 weeks of declared professional certain health.
And this is the moment that makes the tragedy so acute. They weren't just vulnerable, they were reassured into vulnerability.
They dropped their guard.
Of course. The expert told them to. And that assurance creates this huge psychological gap, because if the expert says you're safe, what do you trust when the worst happens anyway?
And the end came so abruptly. Precisely 6 weeks after that, all clear.
He dropped dead at work.
A massive heart attack.
Yeah.
A complete, brutal reversal of what they thought was reality.
I mean, think about the shockwaves that sends through a young family, especially one that had just been told everything was fine. The ground just vanishes from under you.
The narrator remembers coming home from school that day and being greeted by their mother and their aunt and uncle who come from Lawn Rumney.
Ah, so it was a formal, quiet scene.
Yes, the kind that signals immediate devastation. And the narrator's very first request, as soon as they heard the news, it just speaks volumes.
What was it?
They asked for a photo of their father.
Not an explanation, but a connection.
A physical connection. They needed to see his face, to hold on to that visual before moving forward into a world without him.
And that instinct is so crucial because it really sets the stage for the next mystery, doesn't it? The visual paradox that followed.
Which brings us to the funeral. It was held about 3 days later at Thornhill Cemetery. And the narrator notes that because they and their sister were very young, they didn't actually attend. They stayed at their aunt's house in Lanrumney.
So that physical separation is key. The mother went through that most intense final act of grief, the lowering of the coffin alone.
Yes.
She was carrying whatever emotional experience that moment brought. The kids were spared, but it means she returned home carrying something they couldn't possibly understand.
And this is it. This is the core of the 50-year mystery. When the mother returned home after the funeral, the narrator saw this one profound and just utterly confusing look on her face.
And the description is so captivating, an expression that resembled both sadness as well as bliss.
Sadness and bliss. I mean, that's just impossible for the brain to reconcile, especially for a child.
Right. You expect sorrow, anguish, the visible signs of a freshly broken heart.
But bliss, How can the deepest grief coexist with any form of happiness,
Hmm.
especially at that moment?
Well, this is where you run into that cognitive dissonance in how we process emotion. Grief is supposed to be, well, monolithic, pure pain. Yeah.
When the brain sees the external reality, a funeral, a loss, and the visual reality, a face showing something like bliss, those two signals just clash. The mind struggles because it can't file both of those under tragedy.
So the narrator just, they couldn't fathom it. They didn't ask, which, I mean, that makes perfect sense.
Of course.
And eventually, that complex expression was, as they put it, simply forgot about it. But we know that's not real forgetting, is it?
No, not at all. Unresolved emotional data doesn't just disappear. It gets filed away.
Under pending context.
Exactly. It becomes this silent emotional question mark, just waiting for the right key to unlock it. The narrator carried that image, consciously or not, for 5 decades.
50 years.
It's the difference between knowing your mother was sad, which is logical,
Yeah.
and grappling with the impossibility that she was somehow at the same time ecstatic.
Right.
That impossibility is what makes the memory so sticky.
And that brings us to the moment where it gets really interesting. The narrative finally delivers that key. We jump forward 50 years.
To 2009. Yes. The narrator and the mother are just having a casual chat, talking about the past, and during this conversation, the mother finally explains it.
After all that time, the raw edges of the pain have softened, and the emotional distance is there.
And she details her experience, standing right there at the graveside, as the coffin was being lowered into the ground.
She felt the immense sadness and grief, the expected emotion.
But, she said simultaneously, something happened that felt quite extraordinary. She even said, almost miraculous,
So the profound distress was interrupted by something.
by an overwhelming sense of presence, both physical and spiritual. She said she felt a warm hand on her right shoulder.
Wow.
And most crucially, the comfort was also auditory. She heard soft words in her mind.
And this is the message. This is the source of that paradox.
It transformed everything for her.
The exact quote she heard was, "Don't worry, my darling. I'm still with you. Try to be strong for the sake of the kids. One day we will all be together again. I promise."
That's just an incredible revelation.
It is.
Not just a feeling of presence, but a directive, a clear mandate to be strong, and a profound promise of a future reunion.
And if you look at this through that lens of emotional synthesis, it explains everything. The sorrow was real and raw. Her husband was
The
gone.
coffin was right there.
Right. But the bliss, the serenity that came from this entirely internal experience of confirmation and purpose, she wasn't just grieving. She was being comforted and given a new mission.
Focus on the kids.
Exactly. The paradox is resolved. She was experiencing the intense sorrow of separation and the overwhelming bliss of an eternal promise at the same time.
And that's the assurance she carried home. That's what the narrator saw on her face.
That promise, it acted as a cognitive reframing tool. It didn't negate the loss,
No.
but it mitigated the utter hopelessness that so often comes with a sudden tragic death. The bliss was her accepting a connection that transcended the grave. It was her own private source of solace, totally invisible to everyone else who could only see the tragedy.
And that brings us back to you, the listener. This whole story, it just underscores how much we should trust those tiny unresolved details we carry about our loved ones.
That unusual look, that strange hesitation.
Yeah, the thing that just didn't quite fit the script. Sometimes, the most significant answers to those emotional mysteries, they only arrive when time has created enough distance for the story to finally be shared.
And this whole narrative forces us to reconsider what we even define as closure. Closure wasn't just the 50 years that passed.
Yeah.
It was the moment the emotional paradox was finally solved through the telling of the story.
It's a powerful reminder that our external perception of someone's grief is almost always incomplete.
Which I think raises a really important question for all of us. How often do we see someone else's intense pain, the sorrow, and completely miss the internal mitigating source of their strength, their hope, or their quiet bliss? We so often mistake that deeply held private comfort for just some kind of emotional contradiction. Maybe the true deep dive into human emotion requires us to just wait until the source of that internal balance is finally revealed.